Hello, welcome to the channel. It's Wayne here from E-Stim Systems, and today I'm going to talk about insertable electrodes. Hello everyone, it's Wayne here from E-Stim Systems, and today I'm going to talk about something I've been asked to talk about, which are E-Stim electrodes. And not just any electrode, I'm going to talk about E-Stim insertables. These are E-Stim insertables. Now, what's an insertable electrode? Basically, E-Stim consists of several items. Firstly, you have the power box. Now, this can be one of our power boxes, it can be one from a competitor, it can be a TENS unit, but you have a power box. You then have a cable that connects the power box to, guess what? An electrode. And the electrode is the bit that attaches to the body. It either attaches to the body for surface electrodes, or it goes inside the body as an insertable. And today I'm going to talk about insertables. Now, there are actually 3 different places you can insert an electrode, safely, of course. Anal, vaginal, and urethral. Now, I'm not going to talk about urethral play today. This is particularly for E-Stim electrodes, which are for vaginal or anal use. Electrodes like these. So here we have a Decimator. This is probably the world's scariest electrode because it is the world's largest commercially produced E-Stim electrode. It is 4 inches in diameter. It weighs 3.6 kilos. It's a beast. And this is the smallest electrode we do. This is a micro, and it is tiny. It's about the size of an adult thumb. There we are, thumb. So you can see the choice is quite big. So I'm going to go through some of the options. Now, the first thing you need to consider is size. As you can see, we go from big to small. But size is very subjective and it depends on you. A good way of determining size is look at toys that you might already be playing with. The classic dildo, vibrators, that sort of thing. They all give you some idea as to what diameter or girth you can comfortably accommodate. The other thing to consider is length. And now length determines how far the electrode is actually going to go in. We talk about insertable length, and you also have overall length. Insertable length is basically the top of the electrode to about the middle of the neck. So this is the amount of the electrode that would be inserted. I keep scaring people with this, so I'm actually going to chuck this off to one side and get something a little bit smaller. Now, most of our designs are created to insert up to a certain point. In this case, it is about the midpoint of the neck. So you have the head, which is fully inserted. You have the neck, which is also the insulator, and then you have the base, and the base will be outside of the body. So it's this length that you need to consider. You also need to consider the whole mass of the head, because this is quite big and chunky. If you like large objects, this is going to make you feel very full. We do smaller electrodes. There's a few floating around on the shelf behind me, which will give you some idea as to the different variations you have in terms of size. We also do some electrodes which are fully insertable. These are things like the eggs and the E-beads. Now these have a retention cable, so these actually have the cable that powers the electrode inbuilt into the electrode, so you can insert them all the way in, and when you want to release them, you just gently pull on the cable and they come out. And the breaking strain's about 16 kilos, which is way over what it actually needs. Now, the next thing to consider, you've looked at the size, you've looked at the girth and the height. The next thing to consider is the shape. Now, again, we do various shapes depending on your personal taste. There is no shape that is perfect for everyone. Some shapes have ripples like the deviants. There we are, there's some deviants. Other electrodes have different shapes. The Black Collection. A lot of our shapes are based on our personal experiences and experimenting. That's why we end up with weird and wonderful ideas. We have the variations in heads, we have the variation in base styles. The choice is really up to you. Our basic design is what we call a front to back or a top to bottom electrode. So we have a contact, which is the head here. We then have an insulator, and then we have another contact, which is the base, and the actual plugs go into the bottom. The benefit of this design is, firstly, it's symmetrical. So no matter how I turn it, it's not going to make any major difference in sensation when it's being used. However, if I move it in and out, you're going to feel a difference. If you now imagine connecting this up to an E-Stim box and pulsing it, you have the potential for it to pulse in and out. Some people call this ghost fucking. I couldn't possibly comment why. but it gives you some idea what is possible. It's not guaranteed it's always going to happen for you. Some people never experience it, but it is something that is known to occur with this particular style of design. Now, let's talk about contacts. The contacts are the points that actually touch the body and produce some of the sensation. Generally, electrodes have a number of contacts. We have styles that range from a monopolar, so it has single contact, things like the electro wand, and also all of our sounds. These are all classed as single pole electrodes, and we'll do another video talking about how to use sounds and other single pole electrodes. The bulk of our designs are bipolar, so they have two contact points, one contact point here and one contact point here. And more recently, we've created electrodes which have three contact points, the triples. Again, there's a video floating around somewhere, and in fact, if you want to see what they look like, they are there. That's the triple collection. Depending on where the contacts are and depending on how you're driving them, will have some bearing on the sensation, particularly with things like the triples, where there's a number of options, a number of ways of wiring them up. It does give you more versatility in terms of how the sensations occur. And with the E-Stim Systems power boxes, because we produce asymmetrical outputs, we do this deliberately. If you flip the plugs over, you end up with a different set of sensations again. Again, it gives you more options. Now, the flange electrode actually is designed with a flanged base. This basically allows you to insert the electrode. So again, here's the head, here's the insulator, the electrode is inserted like so. But the flange base ensures it doesn't go too far, because when we first started creating electrodes, this was one thing that people would always raise. In my experience as a user of these for the past 20 or so years plus, the likelihood of these going too far is very, very small. If it does go too far, the first thing I will say is don't panic. Just relax. Generally, what goes in is going to come out. Yes, we all hear the horror stories of people having to go to A&E and get things removed.
Setting for his testicles.
Take it! Take it! Take the leg!
Wait.
And they get themselves plastered over social media. You generally find, when you actually look into these are people who've had issues with using normal household items as insertables, bottles, light bulbs, all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. It's not something I'd recommend because they're not designed to be inserted. These are designed to be inserted and they're designed to come out again. So always consider using things that are actually designed for the process rather than picking something off the shelf in the kitchen. Not a great idea. You'll notice that we do electrodes with different sizes. Now, this flange has quite a small head, which is great as a beginner. And in fact, if you're looking for a beginning electrode and you've never used insertables before, the flange is the one I would go for. But also consider the surface area of the contact points and also the size of the insulator. What you actually have is this is contact point, this is a contact point. And if imagine a donut shape around this insulator, that's the area you're going to feel sensation. You're not going to feel sensation at the tip because the current has to flow from point A to point B, and it's the current that actually drives that sensation. If you spread the current over a larger area, you're to a certain extent going to diffuse the sensation. If you spread the current over a small area, it tends to be more intense. Next things to consider about electrodes, and this is not just our electrodes, this is E-Stim electrodes in general. Now, all of our E-Stim electrodes are made of aircraft grade aluminium alloys and stainless steel, and we use food safe plastics when we do insulators. Why do we do this? Well, we find they're very durable. They offer the best levels of conductivity. They're metals after all. Metal is a very, very good conductor. They're durable and they're easy to clean, which is why we offer a lifetime guarantee on all of our insertable electrodes. You might find cheaper electrodes out there which appear to have metal contacts. Be aware of some of the issues. Firstly, sometimes cheaper electrodes will use plating. So they'll use a metal and then they'll use another metal on top as a coating or a plating. This could be something like nickel, which could cause issues if you've got nickel allergies, or it could be a thin chromium plate, which can flake off. Sharp shards of plating is not a great idea. We've also seen electrodes made out of wood. Yeah, really, people have made electrodes in the past out of wood. Great idea with that. And also use stick-on contact points, which again, I'm just not really sure how that ever worked, but they were happy with them. Not something I would recommend. There are other electrodes out there made of conductive rubber. Now, conductive rubber is an interesting material. Indeed, we use it in our conductive rubber loops. Video somewhere there. However, there are also issues with it. It's quite difficult when you're producing conductive rubber electrodes to get consistency. So you lose some of the element of power and sensation because the rubber just doesn't have the same level of conductivity as a metal would. The other issue we have with conductive rubber is it's very difficult to sterilize correctly. So there's an issue with cleaning them. And the longevity is not great, especially if you start to use certain lubes. Never use silicon-based lubes on a silicon-based electrode. It's just going to cause the rubber to go sticky and disintegrate. And even when you store them, if you store them near other silicon items, they're going to get sticky and they stick together. It's the nature of silicon. It's not something we actually like, which is one of the reasons we don't do conductive rubber silicon insertables. They just don't work for us. The other thing I've seen are electrodes made up of laminates, which is great. They look pretty, right up to the point where the laminates start to delaminate and you get really, really sharp edges. Again, not something I would like to use as an insertable. Most of our insertables have 4mm sockets, which means you can use our standard 4mm plugs to plug them into your box. We also do a low profile cable set, which allows you to effectively cut down the amount that's sticking out on an electrode, and you can sit on them. Makes things much more comfortable. Those electrodes that don't use 4mm sockets have a retained cable. As I've previously mentioned, these cables have quite a high breaking strength, something about 16 kilos, which is an enormous weight to try and pull out from somebody. The person is going to break before the cable does. The other thing you need to consider with electrodes is keeping them clean. Now, if you're using an electrode to insert into the body, the last thing you want to do is to insert various bugs and nasties into the body. And equally, once you've finished using it, you need to make sure you clean it before you insert those bugs back into the body at some later date. So always consider, how do you actually clean an electrode? With our electrodes, they're all made of metal and plastic. Most of them can be disassembled, and they can all be cleaned thoroughly before you use them again. When you do clean them, don't use caustic cleaning solutions, as generally that can cause discoloration on the finish of the electrode. And also make sure they're dry before you pack them away. If you leave them damp, all you're going to do is cause unsightly corrosion, which just doesn't look very nice. So we're nearly there. You've thought about the size, you've thought about the shape, you've thought about how it might work with your power box. But how do you actually use the electrodes? Now, due to good old YouTube, I can't bring in a lovely young lady here and demonstrate precisely how you use them. YouTube will soon have our channel pulled down for offering you porn, which is sad, but true. But there are some simple guidelines as to how you actually use an electrode. The first thing is, before you use it, give your electrode a check over. Check there's no scratches or dings or anything like that, and check it's clean. Always make sure they're tight. Just grip the head, grip the base, make sure they're screwed together correctly. Use some lube. We always recommend you use conductive lube. We sell conductive lube. There are other lubes you can use, but check that it's actually designed for E-Stim use and it's designed to be going into the body. Do not use things like olive oil. It's just not a great idea. The lube will help to spread out the sensation. It also helps when you insert the electrode just to ease things in. One of the benefits of using lube is it cuts down on hotspots. Now, hotspots are basically areas of very high intensity current, which sometimes occur when you're playing. And using lube is a good way to cut them down. Insert the electrode before you plug in the power box. And when you do plug in the power box, make sure it's switched off. Always start slowly. Don't push things too far. If it starts to hurt, then possibly you're pushing things too far. Back off a little bit. You're supposed to be enjoying the sensation, unless you're actually a bit of a sadist and you want not to enjoy the sensation, but you know what I mean. There is no rush. Enjoy the journey. Once you finish using any E-Stim electrode, turn the power box down and turn the power box off, disconnect the power box, and then gently remove the electrode. Then, don't forget, clean the electrode and don't put it away damp. All of our electrodes come with a plastic storage tube, which allows you to protect the electrode. So where do you go from here? Well, a few tips for you. Most popular electrode we have is the Mona. If you're worried about size, then consider the Flange. If you want something a bit bigger, then look at the MJ. Incidentally, the MJ was actually developed by two of our team, hence the initials. And if you're size hungry, then consider things like the Torpedo. If you want to take things further, then the new E-Stim Systems triple range could be the way to go, particularly if you've got a dual channel box. The options are mind-blowing. If you're still not sure about what to buy, then please consider leaving a question in the comments below and we'll do our best to answer them. If you like what we're doing, please consider the old thumbs up and possibly even subscribing to the channel. We're creating more videos now that gives you some idea as to how to use our products, as well as giving you information about products that we're creating and the new ideas that we're coming up with. But whatever you do, please be safe and always have fun. Thanks for watching. Bye.